The old library in Bucharest groaned, quietly as the wind slipped through its cracked windows. The building had stood since the 18th century, majestic yet weathered, filled with the scent of aged wood, dusty books and forgotten history. Elias Grigore, a 29-year-old archaeologist, stood at the bottom of the attic stairs. He had just received permission from the caretaker to examine the undocumented archives stored above. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from a growing sense of curiosity that had gnawed at him for weeks. Each wooden step creaked under his weight as he climbed. The attic was dimly lit, with sunlight leaking through broken tiles above. Dust danced in the air like silent spirits. In the far corner, something caught his eye. A worn-out chest, almost hidden beneath a faded sheet. He brushed the cloth away and opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in layers of brittle parchment, was an old leather scroll. The map was drawn on yellowing animal skin and dated 1870. As Elias unrolled it across a rickety table, his eyes widened. The map depicted a section of the Carpathian Mountains, near the Romania-Ukraine border. But what froze him was a name etched faintly in the center. Edelheim, a village he had never heard of. A name that appeared in no record, no atlas, no documented history. Beside the map was an old cracked journal. On its cover, Journal of Father Andre, 1871. Elias sat cross-legged and flipped through the brittle pages, careful not to damage the ink-stained paper. The handwriting inside was frantic, uneven, like it had been written in fear. Day 3. The church bell rang 3 times at midnight, but there was no wind, and no one was there. Day 7, villagers began to vanish. First the children, then the elderly. No bodies, no clues. Day 13, the sky stays gray. Time feels broken. We cannot leave the village. Every path loops back. Day 21, I believe we're all going to disappear. If someone finds this, please don't search for Edelheim. Let this place be forgotten. Elias shivered. Something about those words sank deep into his chest. The attic grew colder, the air thicker, as if the past was creeping back in. He turned to the map again. Edelheim was marked deep within a forested valley, squeezed between 2 steep cliffs. There were no known roads, only a faint red trail, hand-drawn, almost intentionally hidden. Elias didn't rush. He spent days researching the name, the place, the time. Nothing. Edelheim was a ghost. Eventually, he approached his retired mentor, Professor Ionescu, a man who once mapped forgotten war routes and pagan ruins. When Elias showed him the map and journal, the professor turned pale. Edelheim? He whispered, barely audible. So you know it? Elias leaned forward. I've heard rumors, the professor muttered. A village swallowed by a storm in 1871, gone without a trace. People said it was cursed. Others believed it never existed. And you believe that? Ionescu's gaze hardened. I believe some places are lost for a reason. That night, Elias laid the map out in his apartment. Something was wrong with it. The rivers shifted shape under lamplight. A mountain doubled where there had only been one. The map seemed to move. When he tilted it just right, strange symbols emerged, ones he hadn't seen before. An upside-down cross, a circle with a dot, and an open eye, watching him. Then came the knock. 3 sharp taps at the window. He lived on the 5th floor, heart pounding. Elias rushed to the window, nothing, just the cold wind, and a half moon hanging in the sky. But when he turned back, the map had unrolled by itself, pointing directly to Edelheim. Morning came. Elias made his decision. He packed his field gear, a camera, notebook, compass, and the ancient map. Before leaving, he recorded one voice message for his closest friend. If I don't return in a week, find the map I left, but don't follow it. Don't go to Edelheim. He boarded a train to northern Romania, then took a local bus into the hills. His last ride was on horseback, guided by a local man who took him to the edge of an old forest trail. The village of Varbia was the last dot on modern maps. Beyond that, no one dared go. When Elias asked about the path to the valley, an old man shook his head and whispered, "There's nothing there but woods, and the singing." Singing? Elias asked. Sometimes in the dusk, the sound of children's voices, but no one's there. At dawn, Elias entered the forest. The trees loomed high, their trunks like ancient sentinels. Fog hugged the forest floor and the world grew quiet. No birds, no wind, only the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. His GPS lost signal instantly. The compass spun wildly. But the old map, faded and worn, still pointed the way. Hours passed. Time slowed. The deeper he walked, the heavier the air became. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Finally, the trees opened to reveal a ridge. Elias stepped forward carefully, and what he saw made him freeze. Far below, wrapped in mist, were ruins, stone outlines of homes, a church tower broken in half, overgrown paths, crumbled fences. Edelheim, the village that shouldn't exist. Elias stood at the edge of the cliff, the map trembling in his hands as the wind tore through the valley. The ruins below were silent, frozen, like they had been waiting for someone foolish enough to return. The fog thickened as Elias descended the ridge, his boots crunching softly against the damp forest floor. The map was clenched tightly in his gloved hand, its edges frayed from wind and time. The air around him felt too still. Even the trees seemed to lean in closer, like they were watching. It had been hours since he'd left the last signs of civilization behind, and yet he felt less alone with each step. There were no birds, no insects, only the distant rustle of branches and a faint whispering like wind. Except there was no wind. And then it came, the first sound that didn't belong. Children's laughter, brief soft echoing. Elias froze, turning sharply toward the noise. There was nothing, only mist swirling through the trees. He stood still, heart thumping, trying to tell himself it was just his mind. Just nerves. But deep down something told him it wasn't. He pressed on. The deeper he ventured, the stranger the forest became. Trees grew in unnatural angles, twisting like they were frozen mid-scream. Moss clung to everything, wet, thick, choking green. The fog didn't thin. In fact, it grew heavier. He checked his watch. It was 2:13 p.m. He walked. After what felt like 30 minutes, he checked again. Still 2:13. The second hand was stuck. It ticked, then paused, then ticked again. A slow, dragging rhythm. Elias pulled out his compass, still spinning wildly. GPS dead, batteries full, but no signal. Great, he muttered. He had the map. That was all he could trust. And the map led him forward, into a clearing where the trees opened slightly, revealing the broken remains of what had once been a stone foundation, walls half buried in vines and rot. His heart leapt. He had found something. Elias stepped carefully around the ruins. Moss-covered stones marked where walls had once stood. Bits of carved wood poked out from the earth, door frames, rotted furniture. A child's shoe, faded pink, sat beside a collapsed wall. He crouched down beside it. The fabric was fragile but intact. No sign of weathering. No mold, no dirt. As if someone had placed it there. Yesterday. Then something else. A small, rusted tin toy horse, half buried near a tree. Elias picked it up, brushing away the soil. The wheels still turned. Something creaked. He looked up. A shadow moved between trees. He stood slowly, not daring to breathe. Nothing, just the mist and silence. Night came fast in the Carpathians. Elias set up a small tent beside the ruins. He didn't want to, but going back in the dark wasn't an option. The fog hadn't lifted. If anything, it had become denser, pressing in from all sides. He ate a protein bar, drank from his canteen, and tried to focus on notes. He recorded everything, locations, objects, strange feelings. Then he lit a small lantern and settled into his sleeping bag. That's when the dreams began. In the dream, Elias stood in a village he had never seen before, but instinctively knew. Edelheim. Children ran through the streets, laughing, chasing each other, their voices distorted like echoes in a deep cave. Women hung laundry, men chopped wood. Everything moved in eerie silence, as if the world was acting without sound. And then suddenly they all stopped. Every child, every adult, turned their heads toward him, eyes wide and unblinking. A church bell tolled once, twice, and on the third toll, the sky turned black. The people began to scream. Children vanished into smoke. Buildings crumbled. The bell rang out again, and he woke up. Gasping, drenched in sweat, he looked at his watch. 2:13 a.m. The second hand had stopped again. Outside his tent, something moved. A soft crunch of leaves, then the sound of a child crying. Elias unzipped the tent slowly, holding his flashlight in one hand and a small folding knife in the other. The light barely cut through the fog. He stepped out. No wind, no sound. Then, a flash. A figure darted between trees. Too small to be an adult. He called out, "Hello? Are you all right?" Silence. He followed the trail, heart pounding. The crying had stopped, but now he heard whispers, dozens of them, faint, like they were just behind his ears. His flashlight flickered. He turned in every direction but saw nothing. Finally, the whispering stopped as suddenly as it had come. He returned to camp, shaken, and sat in silence until the first light of dawn. The next morning, Elias packed quickly, determined to push forward and find the village before night returned. He followed the map deeper into the valley. The terrain grew steeper, wilder, and then he saw it. An old cart, wooden, broken with iron wheels, half buried in a ditch. Inside it were crates, and something else. Rotten food. Breads, fruits blackened and infested with flies. But again, it looked fresh, like it had only started rotting days ago, not decades. Beside the cart, a child's doll. Its face cracked, its eyes hollow. Further ahead, he found a watch. Gold-plated, elegant, and stopped at 2:13. By midday, Elias reached a clearing. It was larger than before. At the center stood a building. Tall and skeletal, a church, its steeple broken, cross-bent sideways. Crows circled above but never landed. Elias approached carefully. Ivy choked the stone walls. Windows shattered. But the heavy wooden doors remained intact, shut tightly. He pushed. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. Then he saw it, chains. From the inside, someone had locked it from within. Elias stepped back, staring up at the building. Then, bunk, a single bell toll echoed from the steeple. His heart stopped. He looked up. The bell had no clapper, and no one had touched it. Elias backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the ancient church. The bell echoed long after it should have faded. He didn't speak, didn't write. He just stood there, unsure whether he was awake or still trapped in the dream. Above him, the clouds thickened. Below, the earth seemed to whisper, and the village of Edelheim waited. The church stood like a monument to sorrow, half sunken in the soil of time. Its wooden frame sagged under the weight of moss and rot, and shattered stained glass windows clung desperately to their iron frames. A rusted bell hung crooked above, silent and still. Elias stood before the doors, uncertain. The wind had died. Not a bird chirped, not a branch creaked. He placed a trembling hand on the door. It opened with a groan, a long wailing moan that echoed into darkness. Dust spiraled in the air like ash, and the smell hit him, mildew, decay, old wood, and something else, something faintly metallic like dried blood. Elias stepped inside. The silent sanctuary. Light filtered dimly through the broken windows, casting fragmented colors across the dusty pews. The altar was intact but covered in cobwebs. Rows of rotting benches stretched out like frozen echoes of a forgotten congregation. But it was the silence that strangled Elias the most. It was too still. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the presence of silence, pressing against his ears like water over the head. He scanned the church. There, near the altar, stood a small podium, and on it, miraculously untouched by dust, lay a black leather-bound book. The pages looked old, delicate. Elias stepped closer, hesitant but drawn. He picked it up. The Journal of Pastor Wilhelm. The first page bore a shaky inscription. Wilhelm M. Krauss, Shepherd of Edelheim, 1868. The entries started off mundane, village births, Sunday sermons, seasonal harvests. But as Elias turned the pages, the tone darkened. At August 3rd, 1870, the villagers speak of whispers, of strange voices coming from the old well near the square. At first I dismissed it as the wind. August 10th, livestock are dying. Their bodies are found stiff, eyes wide open as if frightened to death. No wounds, just dead. August 14th, children have gone missing. 3 now. The villagers grow afraid. Some claim they saw figures watching from the forest. Elias felt his throat tighten. The words had been scribbled faster, sloppier. The ink occasionally smudged as if written with trembling hands. August 21st, I heard it. Last night. A voice calling from the well. A child's voice. But when I approached, there was nothing. August 26th, I forbade anyone from going near the well. Yet tonight I saw lights flickering there. I fear they no longer listen to me. September 1st, the villagers have changed. Their eyes are distant. I speak, but they do not respond. They gather nightly, but they do not pray. I hear them chanting. Not in German, not in Latin. It is a language I do not know. Elias's hands began to sweat. September 13th, they came to the church. All of them, silent, still. They filled the pews, stared at me with empty faces. Then one of them closed the doors. I write this with what time I have left. I do not believe I will leave this place. The well was never just a well. The final line chilled Elias to his bones. They're beneath us now. Whispers below. A sound crept into the silence. A whisper. At first Elias thought it was the wind again, curling through the broken windows. But the air was still. The whisper was coming from beneath the floorboards. He followed it slowly, stepping past pews warped by time, until he reached a faded rug behind the altar. The sound grew louder, soft voices murmuring, too many to count, all speaking at once in an unintelligible tongue. It made his skin crawl. He pulled the rug aside. A wooden hatch. Elias knelt and gripped the rusted iron ring. It groaned as he lifted it. A wave of damp, cold air spilled out, reeking of mold and something long dead. The darkness below was thick, swallowing the dim light from the sanctuary. He took out his flashlight. Its beam shook as he descended the old wooden steps. The air was dense. Stone walls surrounded him, carved long ago by forgotten hands. The tunnel was narrow, forcing Elias to crouch. Strange symbols lined the walls, circles within circles, jagged runes, handprints burned into the stone itself. Deeper he went, following the whispers. They grew clearer, more insistent. Children's voices, laughing, crying, calling his name. Elias, Elias, come play. His breath quickened. His light flickered. And then he entered the chamber. It was massive. A subterranean sanctuary beneath the church carved into the earth like a wound. In the center lay a circular pit, surrounded by chalk markings. Animal bones, melted wax, and dried blood. Symbols were etched into the stone floor. Ancient, primal, not Christian. Elias stood at the edge of the pit, staring down into the void. The whispers rose like smoke wrapping around his ears. His heart pounded. He felt something stir. Far below in the black, something moved. He staggered back, the flashlight trembling in his grip. The air was vibrating now, low, pulsing, unnatural. The whispers turned to hissing, then laughter, then silence. His light flickered again, then died. Total darkness. Then, a breath behind him. He spun around. Nothing, but the feeling didn't leave. Something else was in the room, watching, waiting. He turned to flee, stumbling back up the stairs. His breath's ragged, cold sweat on his skin. Back in the church. He slammed the hatch shut and dragged a bench over it, though he knew it was useless. Whatever was down there didn't need doors. Elias stood in the center of the church, the journal still clutched in his hand. His eyes were wide and his mind raced with 1,000 questions. What happened to the villagers? Why had they all gathered here? Willingly? And what was beneath that church? He looked up at the crucifix above the altar. The wooden Christ had cracked down the middle, its face warped with time and moisture. But in the dim light for just a second, it almost looked like it was weeping. Elias stepped out into the night, the fog curling thick around the church like fingers. But the forest was no longer quiet. Something had awakened. The trees whispered, not in wind, but in voices. Calling, murmuring, chanting. And from beneath the earth, far behind him, a bell began to ring. Slow, hollow, and no one had touched it. Elias didn't remember falling asleep. When he opened his eyes, he was still in the underground chamber beneath the church. The air was thick, cold, wet, silent. The door he had come through was gone, just stone now. As if it had never been there. He was trapped. Only the faint light of his lantern remained, flickering weakly. Shadows danced on the walls. He called out, but the only answer was the echo of his own voice. Then came the whispering, faint all around him, like the wind murmuring through leaves, but there was no wind here. Just darkness, and something inside it. At first he thought it was his imagination, but the shadows started to move, shapes in the distance, just outside the edge of the lantern light. Human shapes, but wrong. Elias stepped closer. His heart thudded hard against his ribs. The figures stood still, silent. As he raised the lantern, he saw them clearly. They had no faces. Smooth skin where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. Their heads turned toward him as if they could see. And then, without warning, they vanished into the dark, all at once. Elias backed away, breathing hard. His lantern shook in his hand. He stumbled over something on the floor, wood and leather. A journal. The same kind as Pastor Wilhelm's. He flipped it open. The handwriting was frantic, uneven, ink smeared with water or tears. We opened the well. We thought it would bring us salvation. Instead, we brought them. The ritual pulled at the veil. Time unraveled. I saw days pass in minutes, faces blurred. The children cried, then disappeared. I begged them to stop. They said it was already too late. If you're reading this, you're not alone down here. Elias closed the journal. He felt dizzy. Time was strange here. Had it been hours, minutes? He couldn't tell. He looked down at his hands. His breath caught in his throat. They were fading. He could see the stone floor through his fingers. No, 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 he whispered, clutching at his arms. The more he panicked, the faster it happened. His arms, chest, legs turning translucent. He wasn't just stuck. He was vanishing. Then he heard a small voice. Don't be afraid. He turned. A little girl stood a few feet away, pale, glowing faintly. Her eyes were wide and sad. Her dress was old, dirty, torn at the hem. Elias took a step back. Who are you? I'm Laura, she said. I lived here. Before it happened. What happened? Her voice cracked. The grown-ups tried to talk to the spirits. They opened a door they couldn't close. And now, we're still here, she whispered. But our time has stopped. We can't leave, and soon, you won't either. She pointed to a small broken clock on the floor nearby. The hands were frozen at 2:13, same as the one he'd seen in the abandoned houses, same as the one in his dream. That's when the ritual ended, Laura said, and the village disappeared. Elias's skin prickled with goosebumps. So it's true? He murmured. The whole village gone? Not gone, Laura said, voice hollow. Just somewhere else. She looked up at him and her eyes glistened. You still have time, but not much. Laura pointed down a narrow stone corridor. You need to see it. He followed her, heart pounding. The tunnel twisted deeper into the earth, until finally they reached a chamber. In the center was a tall, ornate mirror. Its frame was carved with ancient symbols, familiar, ones pagan, the same as those around the ritual pit. Elias stepped forward and stopped. The mirror didn't show his reflection. It showed him, but he wasn't moving. The other Elias stood still, eyes wide open, a crooked smile frozen on his face. Then it blinked. Elias stumbled backward. The figure in the mirror didn't copy him. It watched him. Then slowly, it raised its hand and touched the inside of the mirror. Elias felt a chill race through his spine. He looked down. His hand had turned completely transparent. Why are you showing me this? He gasped. But Laura was gone. Only silence. The mirror began to tremble. A cracking sound echoed through the chamber. And then, the other Elias stepped forward out of the mirror. Elias turned to run, but the tunnel behind him had disappeared. Only stone. The lantern flickered and died. He was plunged into darkness, heart racing, breath shallow, and from the blackness behind him came footsteps. Slow, deliberate, getting closer, then whispers. Soft, familiar, like dozens of voices at once. Elias turned around one last time, and the final thing he saw was his own face staring back at him, but with eyes that weren't his, and a smile that didn't belong. Elias stumbled out of the underground chamber, heart pounding, breath ragged. The cold night air slapped his face as he pushed the church doors open. But instead of relief, the world around him was drenched in unnatural silence. The trees loomed too tall. The moon hung still as if time itself had paused. He pulled out his compass just to be sure. It spun in slow circles. No direction, no north. Panicked, Elias took the path he believed was east, toward where he had come. But after walking nearly an hour through the foggy woods, he found himself back where he started, the old church. Its crooked cross tilted like it was watching him. He tried again, and again. Each time, no matter the direction, he returned to the same spot. The village wouldn't let him leave. With trembling hands, Elias turned on his camera and began to record. If someone finds this, my name is Elias Moreau. I'm an archaeologist. I came here to find a village. Edelheim, I think it found me instead. His voice cracked. Behind the lens, the village remained eerily still. No birds, no rustling wind, just the occasional whisper that seemed to ride the fog. He filmed the abandoned homes, the broken swing set, the decaying schoolhouse. Time had stopped, but someone still watched. Every frame captured more shadows than he remembered. Sometimes he caught brief movements at the edge of the screen, faceless, pale shapes ducking behind buildings. Elias made a decision. If he couldn't escape, maybe he could end it. He returned to the church and made his way back into the underground chamber. The ritual pit glowed faintly as if waiting for him. The pagan symbols pulsed, alive beneath layers of dust. He doused it in gasoline from his pack, something he'd brought just in case, then climbed back up and soaked the wooden pews and altar. A final match. A breath, then flames. The fire roared to life, consuming centuries of secrets in seconds. Smoke curled through the stained glass, shattering it into screams. But then something shifted. As the church burned, Elias stumbled outside, coughing, eyes stinging. And for the first time, the village returned. The buildings, once in ruin, stood restored, glowing softly beneath the firelight. The cobblestones beneath his feet were clean. The sky, now blood red, pulsed like a living thing. And then they appeared. Dozens of villagers, silent and still, forming a perfect circle around Elias. Their clothes were old, their eyes hollow, their mouths opened in unison, speaking only one thing.
Now you are one of us.
Elias froze. He backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The whispers grew louder. The air turned thick, time bent, and something cold crawled beneath his skin. His camera still rolled. It captured the villagers as they stepped closer. Their mouths no longer moved, but Elias could still hear them. Inside his mind, he screamed. A deep primal scream, then static. The screen went black. 10 years later, a group of hikers discovered an old video camera, half buried in the roots of a tree deep in a Romanian forest. The battery was dead, but the memory card was intact. The footage was grainy but real. A man, Elias, talking to the lens, panicked, trapped. The final image, villagers standing still in firelight. And Elias turning around, his face contorted in horror. Authorities searched. But no village named Edelheim existed in any records. No ruins, no path, no trace. Only the footage remained. And in the final second of the video, a single whisper echoed through the speakers. "We are still watching.